Guess who? Hey everyone, I just got back from the 2-day Madman anime festival in Perth, and it was a lot of fun. It was very tiring though. I expect to be laid out for Labor Day, which, you know, I'm very glad the timing lines up on that one. So I could do a whole bunch of things there. Chief among them, on the Saturday night, was the exclusive premiere, premiere in Western Australia anyway, for the Sword Art Online movie, Ordinal Scale. You might think that someone who's... I've made my thoughts known on SAO by this point. I would hope it would be understood by now that I'm not a fan. But the tickets were cheap enough, and I spent so much money there. And, well, you know, when in Rome, as they say. I mean, if I can catch an exclusive, cheap first look of the movie, I will do it if it just aligns with whatever else I'm doing at the time. So, this will be a Confused Matthew requested review sort of thing. I'm not going to wait for all the footage to surface so I can do a proper review. I'm just going to sit here and deliver it to you right now, and I will attempt to align stills from the trailer or whatever to the corresponding talking point, just to give some form of coherency, but yeah, this is the form you're going to be getting. And I will also be putting up a spoiler alert right now, which I don't usually do, but obviously this film is very, very new. I imagine that you might want to see it. I don't know. To put it out there in a non-spoiler context, it's like it was about as good as you would expect someone like me to take to it. It wasn't even that bad, but it was very, very mediocre and showcased no real improvements to what I consider the big flaws of the series right now. But it's also worth mentioning that although the two inform each other, the experiences of watching the SAO movie and watching the SAO movie in a theatre packed full of SAO fans, screaming SAO fans, is that there's two very different guidelines going into that sort of thing. Oh boy, I don't usually have choice words about fandoms because, I mean, I'm a big fan of Danganronpa, who am I to complain? But, that was an experience. It's like I legitimately think that opening day Star Wars Force Awakens would have been less painful than that. And we'll get into why as we go. Alright, so, yeah, turn it off if you don't want me to spoil the movie, but here we go. So it opens up with a quick 2-minute narration, which was very confusing because it only really goes through the very first arc of SAO out of 5, and I was very worried that either this is some sort of midquel, or they literally think that the Ironclad arc is like the crown jewel of SAO and will be, the main thematic source. Thankfully, neither of those were quite the case. The film puts us 3 years into the timeline, at the very least. So at this point, pretty much all of the characters who are still alive know each other in real life, they're hanging out, and this is where the crux of the movie is introduced. There is this other piece of newfangled technology going around called Augma, which is this little headset that clips on and lets you do all sorts of things. There's chat functions, there's map data, but most importantly, it also comes with a whole bunch of augmented reality games, including Ordinal Scale, which is, as far as I can tell, an attempt to integrate some form of segregated combat into the real world. And that's where all of the fight scenes come from. And, well, first off, I think this is actually... The movie easily has the best action scenes yet. They poured money into this project, and it shows, and it's all very exciting. And that in itself would probably put Ordinal Scale above crap like the Yu-Gi-Oh movie back in 2004, which was just, bad. But I never really quite got the pure, differences between AR and VR. I didn't get... It was very hard to understand how physical recoil and tactile response worked in an augmented reality game where, you might be seeing all these monsters, but in reality, you're, waving invisible sticks around in the air. And the film doesn't play with that as much as it should, and it never really establishes quite how that works. Which, it was very confusing, but in terms of contrived plot elements, it is the least of the film's problems. So, get this, the survivors of SAO, who are currently at this specialised school for rehabilitation from having been stuck in full dive for 2 years, they get given the the AR gear for free, and they are also given tickets to see this live concert in about a week's time from the game's mascot, Una. Now, the second I heard both of these, two thoughts came to mind. It's either giving all of the main characters this gear is a contrivance for the sake of the writers, or B, it's a trap on the part of the villain. And it turns out that the latter is completely true. It's a very slow burn plan, I will give him that. There are two players in the evil scheme. The first one that you really meet is the number 2 ranked player of Ordinal Scale, who, invariably, it turns out he is an old member of the game who was a part of the Knights of the Blood Oath, who were doing raids on bosses trying to clear the game way back when, but he could never really make it stick because his fear of death kept him out of pretty much every raid. And that invariably got some little girl in the simulation killed, because he was just unable to follow through with that. And so he holds some resentment towards Kirito and Asuna for doing that. This little girl turns out to be Una, who turns out to be the daughter of the second villain, the professor who developed the AR gear. And his plan is to round up as many SAO survivors as he can, twist the mechanics of Ordinal Scale and the AR machinery to steal the memories of the SAO survivors, to pull enough of that collective memory and emotional energy together to some long convoluted thing, go through an AI program to bring his dead daughter back to life. Which, to be honest, I actually think that's a pretty decent motivation. He feels that his life was robbed from him because he ended up giving his daughter the original SAO VR gear, and because he wanted to impress everyone, including her, and it got her killed, and he feels very guilty about that, and so he has gone to great lengths to achieve the absolute antithesis, even going as far as developing augmented reality gear as opposed to virtual reality gear. And he spends quite a bit of time discussing the differences between the two, the pros of AR versus the dangers of VR. And the absolute best scene of the film is when Kirito infiltrates a college ceremony where he's speaking on this, and there's this very short little back and forth between the two on what's at stake between the development of these two technologies. Kirito asks, like, you know, if VR makes a virtual world into reality, does augmented reality then just induce virtual elements into reality and blurring the lines and creating all sorts of dissociation? And that was good. That actually added a little bit of a sci-fi bent to it, and I wish they had sort of explored that a lot more. Unfortunately, the primary subplot, besides that huge conflict which results in a... actually, I guess I'll finish up that first. So that whole thing results in a concert where there's this big, huge battle where because up to this point, if people get their ass kicked in ordinal scale, the game, there's, you know, technical mumbo-jumbo, they get their brains zapped and they lose a little bit of their memory. Everyone is rounded up to the stadium to try and do this on a mass scale with as many SAO survivors as they can. The problem is there's more of a deadly bent to it this time, because there's a high chance that that sort of brain manipulation activity could actually kill everyone there. And again, it's just like, it seemed so obvious from the second all this was announced that it was all a trap. It stuns me that Kirito is not paranoid enough by this point to make these connections, especially after the end of GGO, which, you know, it should have driven him up the wall in terms of, you know, losing his patience. So that's the main plot. The primary subplot, I guess, is the ongoing romance between Kirito and Asuna. And Christ, I've never hated the relationship, but I'm just so stunned that so much of this series is focused on it, and it leads to very, very big gaps in the story where there's not a lot of combat, and there's just this very, very slow investigation into the mystery of, why are some people being wounded? Who is Eiji, the number 2 player? And between those moments are, you know, sweet romantic nothings between our hero and heroine, and it's just, you know, a love story has always been the quickest way to drag proceedings down, and you can kind of feel how it burns on in a movie, because, oh god, it's just unbearable to just watch them go through the motions. And although there isn't really a lot of creepy sexual politics in this one, as there is in the TV show, it still kind of stuns me that this is like the third time that Asuna's been made a damsel in distress, because there's this point where she gets her memory damaged, and she starts to worry about whether she can still be in love with Kirito, because, you know, if she's losing her memories of how they met in the first place, blah blah blah. So Kirito's personal motivation is to literally go get her memories back so that they can save their relationship. It's like, that's just completely asinine. I just don't understand how that's... I don't understand how this sense of mystery and this sense of danger, it just isn't enough for him to go and do this, even though it's a different task because it's not full dive. And, like, that was my exact problem with GGO as well. It's, you know, why couldn't he just have had his own personal goal? It's like, no, he couldn't. You have to drag someone else into it. So I think that's a pretty decent blow by blow of the movie up until the finale, which is a little bit of its own can of worms. But I want to sidetrack myself for a bit here and talk to you about my thoughts on the SAO fanbase. And, you know, usually when we say a fan base is bad, we can at least distance ourselves from, both them and the cause. If you don't like Five Nights, you can just not play it and you don't have to think about it. But, as a very vocal non-fan who just wanted to watch a movie, I had to put myself in there in real life with a very, very vocal fan base. And, let me tell you, it just it stunned me. Like, the reactions I saw to what was in that movie, which was an ultimately very mediocre movie that would only satisfy by association and by the numerous fanboy moments, it was just difficult to understand how people could lose their minds over this sort of thing. But it happened multiple times. During the final battle, they have to go into level 100 of the old Ironclad to fight the final boss to... I don't know, I kind of forget what the ultimate endpoint there is, but basically that's what they have to do to win the game while all the madness in the stadium is going on. And when they get all their old gear back, woo! It's like, why? So, anytime Kirito and Asuna kiss, woo! Anytime Kirito and Asuna attempt to kiss, but something interrupts them, I don't get it. Usually, when I see something like this, I say to myself, it's like, what's going on? Am I missing something? It's like, no, I'm not missing something. I saw the same show as everyone else, and I'm watching the same movie as everyone else. Why is everyone so easily impressed over this? And while I was at the convention itself, I heard a kid behind me saying, hey, how cool would it be if this VR gear existed in real life? Kid, the point of the series has flown way over your head, and there's not much of one to begin with. So, the theatre experience was just painful, not only because it was fairly noisy because of that, and the location itself was just kind of pretty bad in general, but it just kind of boggled the mind to see such an outrageous reaction to so many mediocre or just obvious moments. Like, every joke in the film was the most obvious, most played out gag, and the crowd completely ate it up. It was just explosions of laughter every 5 minutes. But every joke was so telegraphed, it's like, I don't know, it's like it was a Monty Python script or something where there's some guy in the front holding up a cardboard that says, cue for applause, or something like that. It's just so obvious. So, even though I don't say this often, because I like to, let it go and just let people do their own thing, but I do have a line to draw, and that's when I go see a film in cinemas, and cinema experiences just incompatible, we'll say. But just, because of the outrageous reaction to the film itself, I can say with empirical real-life evidence that SAO fans are fucking morons. And I feel like this is bolstered because there are just so many plot holes with regards to all of the swerves that come, in the last, 5 minutes. The big one, and this didn't even occur to me while I was watching it, it wasn't until I'd walked out that I thought about it. They have to use the AR gear to do a full dive to solve the problem. And only after I walked out did I think, yeah, what? No, that wouldn't happen, at all. They just wouldn't have that functionality. The AR was developed as a complete antithesis to VR. So, for there to be any sort of built-in functionality for full dive, even something locked behind old firmware. It's like, that wouldn't happen. The villain stands against everything VR represents. He's running in the opposite direction. So, thematically and plot-wise, it just makes no sense. And, how many other people in the theatre would have questioned that? And, also, it kind of stuns me that they were able to go back to level 100 with all their old gear. It kind of amazes me that save data still exists, but the data on the girl who died, who they're doing all this madness to try and bring back, there's nothing on her, apparently. They have to steal everyone else's memories. And also, I'm only 90% sure, but I think the boss of Floor 100 was meant to be the leader of the game. It was meant to be Akihiko Kayaba, but it's not. It's just some, mega monster. Woo! Come watch the film. Come spend $15 to watch some pretty colours. So, that's kind of weird in and of itself. And then right at the end, because at this point you've got, because the idol singer Yuna turns out to be this sort of vaguish ghost girl that's been following Kirito around and inexplicably leading him to where he needs to go. And at the end, she tries to protect everyone while they're under attack from all these monsters. So it turns out, because apparently her save data was tied to the boss of Floor 100, and now that it's dead, the save data is going to be reset. I don't even want to think about how that works. Plus, if the save data for the AI construct, which is meant to be a representation of this dead daughter that they're trying to bring back, it's just for fuck's sake. It's not even a hard to follow plot. It's a pretty by the numbers movie. But you can kind of tell they were trying to squeeze all of the excitement of a full season into a just under 2-hour movie. And between pace and cohesion, it's something's got to give when you're making when you're trying to make that sort of direction. And yeah, I think I've given a pretty good impression of the movie itself. It just stunned me coming out of the theatre with everyone going, woo, woo! It's yeah! It's I well and truly do not understand. Well, I guess I just don't understand the fanboy mentality in general. Even in that one part of Danganronpa 3, which I shrieked at, it's not like that blinded me from the rest of the series' problems. Whereas, you look at this, whereas you see all these SAO fans in the theatre unironically cheering Kirito and Asuna on, as if it's, a relationship that isn't beset by problems and, hasn't already been tampered with in a few key ways, and it's just... But, whatever, if they enjoyed the movie, that's okay. I think any SAO fan will at least enjoy it, but if you want to watch this movie, don't make the same mistake I did. That's all I'm gonna say on that. Yeah, those are my impressions on the SAO movie. This sort of me sitting behind the microphone thing will not be a regular occurrence. I think the quality is going to speak for itself. I'm kind of tempted to just cut it and start all over anyway. But, the weekend was fun besides that. But I wanted to do this just so I didn't have to go back and watch the movie again, just to do a proper review. So yeah. Look forward to more well-formed content in the future that doesn't revolve around me being fairly raw and unedited.